U.S. markets took a quick nosedive for a third day today as President Trump doubles down on his sweeping tariff agenda. The Dow slipped 3.1% when markets opened this morning. The S&P 500 also took a tumble, dropping 3.5%. But just moments ago, stocks took a positive turn in a sudden reversal. The Dow jumped 300 points, erasing a loss of 1,700. Let's take a look at where we stand right now. Things are back down again right now. It's negative 205, so it's dropping. Exactly what we're talking about here, the uncertainty, the markets going back and forth. Now, global markets also responded to the economy because of the uncertainty surrounding Trump's tariffs. Hong Kong, their markets led the losses with a 13% decline. Japan hit an 18-month low, falling by nearly 8%. Meanwhile, London and Germany opened this morning with similar numbers to the U.S. Trump says the moves are necessary to even the deficits on the global stage. Let's take a listen.
I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. Forget markets for a second. We have all the advantages. We'll get it straight out. We're going to become a wealthy nation again, wealthy like never before. And we're not going to let other nations that have been ripping us off, whether it's China or the European Union, with all of the European nations that have just made it's been like a feast.
The president echoed that message on Truth Social this morning. He says, quote, oil prices are down, interest rates are down. The slow-moving Fed should cut rates. Food prices are down. There is no inflation, and the long-time abused USA is bringing in billions of dollars a week from the abusing countries on tariffs that are already in place. He went on to criticize China. Trump accused leaders there of ignoring his warning to not impose retaliatory tariffs. CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi will join us in just a moment for reactions from the president. But first, let's bring in CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger to break down what we're seeing from the markets. Good morning to you, Jill. What do you make of these numbers right now?
Wow. I mean, this is turbulence. This is uncertainty. That's really the word of the last few weeks, right? Because it is uncertain how long these tariffs will stay in place. Because if these tariffs, as they are have been announced, and the retaliation, if they stay in place for a period of time, I'm talking more than 4 to 6 weeks, then we are likely to see an economy that will slow down, perhaps slide into a recession. And we're also going to see prices start to rise. That combination, that's called stagflation, stagnating economy, inflation. And it's very difficult because the Fed is kind of stuck in a corner when you have that situation. Should they cut interest rates because the economy is slowing, or should they keep interest rates high to combat higher prices? This is not a great situation. That's why we're seeing this big sell-off from Thursday, Friday, and now into this morning. But again, these are volatile times when we see markets open down 1,000 points. This is the kind of period where you say, oh, I could be down 1,000 points and end up the day up 50 points on the Dow.
Okay. Jill, moments from now, the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve System will hold a closed-door meeting to talk about inflation and interest rates in response to these tariffs. So can we expect to see the Fed cut interest rates because of this meeting?
I don't think they're going to cut rates. I really don't. I mean, first of all, there is not enough data to make a decision. Fed Chair Powell spoke on Friday, and in those comments, he was very clear. We do not know the impact. We think that the tariffs will lead to higher prices and slow down growth. But until there is evidence, one way or another, I don't think the Fed is going to take any action. And, you know, I also want to say that the Federal Reserve is made up of individuals, of human beings. And when you think about Jerome Powell and the Fed, I think that they are wildly informed by what happened during COVID. They know that they took too long to start raising interest rates to combat inflation. And I don't think they want to see the embers of inflation reignite on their watch. So I think they're going to probably want to see whether or not the economy slows down so much so that there will be destruction in the labor force, or whether those prices will be up more than they are really comfortable with. For now, I think they do nothing.
Okay, so Jill, when you take all of this into consideration, what should Americans be doing right now when it comes to their spending habits and their savings as well?
Well, let me do what they shouldn't do. If you have a 401k, do not obsessively check your account. It's just not worth it. Right. Really, it's just not worth it. Let's say that you are worried about a real slowdown, or you work in an industry where you could be impacted by cuts and tariffs, or you're a federal government worker and you've survived so far, but you're scared. This is the time to really take action by looking at the things you can control. How am I spending my money? Do I need to delay some of my larger spending plans? Is there some higher interest debt that I can start to pay down because things are better than I thought they'd be? If you look at what you can control yourself, I think you're going to feel a lot better than looking at red screens in the morning and green screens in the afternoon. Please know that if you are a long-term investor, making any move right now, that's called market timing, and it does not work. You know what we need to do? We need to have time in the market, not timing the market.
Okay, always some very great advice from you, Jill. Thank you so much for joining us on the stream today.
Sure, thank you.
And as we said, CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi, she brings us the latest from the Trump administration. The president seemingly hinted at possible negotiations with Japan this morning while also slamming China. So what more can you tell us about this, Olivia?
Yeah, Muga, it's already a very busy day here at the White House. Trump on Truth Social this morning said he spoke with the Prime Minister of Japan. They had a conversation, and he says that the Prime Minister will be sending a top team to negotiate on tariffs to the United States. He went on to say they have treated the U.S. very poorly on trade. They don't take our cars, but we take millions of theirs. Likewise, agriculture and many other, quote, things. It all has to change, but especially with China. Now, this comes as President Donald Trump has said he is open to talking with the leaders of many countries to make deals on these reciprocal tariffs. It's also important to note that Japan is an ally of the United States. So by doing these reciprocal tariffs on them, he risks pushing them away, alienating them, and pulling them into the arms of China, who is open to free trade with their partners. So quite notable there that of all the countries, he's saying Japan specifically is going to be sending a delegation soon to the White House to be discussing these reciprocal tariffs and making a deal with him.
And we know members of Trump's administration spent much of the weekend defending the president's tariffs. This morning, National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett had this to say about potential negotiations with up to 50 countries. Let's listen to that, Olivia, and then we'll talk to you on the other side of things.
I've seen some deals that are great, and President Trump is going to decide if they're great enough. But again, after decades and decades of mistreating American workers, it's going to be tough to get him to decide to really come to the table and sign on the dotted line. But when he does, he's going to sign with that big, long, beautiful signature, and he'll have made a great deal for America.
So, Olivia, does this contradict the president's previous message that these tariffs were just absolutely here to stay?
Well, Mugo, that's the that's the big question here today. Deal or no deal? We've heard from Secretary Lutnick over the weekend, who told our Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation that these tariffs are here to stay. Secretary Besson, Treasury Secretary, also said that it's really hard to negotiate down these trade deficits with countries and make a deal on something so quickly when these trade deficits have really over several years, like decades long, trade deficits have been created. He said it's hard to renegotiate that. But then you hear the president talking about making deals with loads of countries and that everyone's coming to him to try to make a deal. He also said last night that there are lots of leaders, European, Asian, all over the world, they're dying to make a deal. But Trump is saying they don't want to have trade deficits. So we've been hearing different things from different people out of this White House of whether or not these tariffs are here to stay. It does seem, though, that 10% tariff, that blanket tariff that the White House debuted last week, that is one that's here to stay. But those reciprocal tariffs, which could go into effect on Wednesday, April 9th, are the ones that the White House are trying to negotiate. But as we mentioned, there are a lot of countries that Trump has put on that reciprocal tariff list. That's a lot of deals to make within the next 48 hours. And we already know from what we heard from Jill, the markets are responding. So for the White House, it's whether or not that market pressure is going to change how they're viewing these reciprocal tariffs, which is what the markets specifically are reacting to.
Right. And also happening today, we know Trump is set to greet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. Do we know what the two leaders plan to discuss behind closed doors?
Yeah, this was an interesting meeting, kind of popped up at the last second. We heard about it late last week that Benjamin Netanyahu would be coming to the White House. He's here today meeting with Trump later on this afternoon. But what's going to be top of mind for them to discuss is that 17% reciprocal tariff that the U.S. has now put on Israeli products, or will put on Israeli products, come Wednesday. Israeli officials last week, when they heard about that announcement, openly expressed surprise at that because they've been working with the U.S. on free trade for a while. They're obviously one of our closest allies in the region, and there's an ongoing war there where they need our backing and support. So quite notable that Netanyahu is here today. He arrived yesterday. He said he met with Secretary Lutnick and the U.S. Trade Representative to discuss that reciprocal tariff, but also top of mind will be the war in Gaza, that ongoing war where there's been discussions of ceasefire. They will be discussing that. Also, Israeli-Turkey relations, Israeli relations with Syria. There's a lot on the plate for them to talk about today, but I have a feeling the last thing that they wanted to talk about is defending their trade with the United States.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. Olivia Rinaldi, thank you so much for joining us on the stream today.